All right, buddies, it's time to talk defense. So I'm going to start off with 5 tips for defense, and this will be part 1, and we'll continue on this and see what kind of questions everybody has about defense, and we'll roll on from there, okay? Here we go. Tip number 1 for defense is to understand what the min-max philosophy is. Teams play different styles of min-max, and what I mean by min-max is that you play minimum bodies on defense, and then when you need to, you maximize the outposts that are in defense to respond to threats in the back line or on the flanks. Most teams like to play 3 or 4 people maximum on defense, and those people are usually squad leads, and then they will flex infantry bodies that are pre-assigned before the game to flex to defense OPs. And so you'll have infantry listed on the defense in the roster, and then they will flex over to the back line when they need to. But most of the time, they're going to flex over to the front line to help bolster the attack. And of course, most teams will agree to say, hey, we want the most people on offense as possible, and we just want to minimize defense, and we should be able to control the front line, and that should be enough. The big part of that, as I always mention on stream, is I'm monitoring the team's perimeter security. How well are they controlling the front line and keeping bodies from leaking through, and just in some maps like Kursk or Foy, playing map edge to map edge coverage to make sure nobody's sneaking around and coming around the back line, that sort of thing. But that is pretty much the min-max philosophy. Minimize a number of bodies on defense, maximize the offense, minimize the number of bodies on defense, and then also maximize the OPs on defense when you have a threat back there. Okay, so that is number 1 on defense that everybody needs to sort of understand. I think most teams play by. Number 2 is you have to determine your risk appetite. So this goes along with number 1 in determining, okay, how risky do we want to be with our defense? Do we want to play with nobody in sector? Do we want to have maybe 1 OP on hard cap and that's about it? Some teams you will literally have 1 blueberry go into their sector and the point will start capping because everybody's on the attack. They are going full out and they'll respond to threats as they see fit. Some teams are really confident in their ability to respond, but others maybe play a little bit too risky and you risk the enemy going into the back line and spawn bombing and flooding your point. And what do I mean by spawn bombing is that the enemy gets a garrison up in the back line and they wait for the perfect moment and they flood maybe 10 bodies there first. They start cap pressure, and then they flood. They see they're winning, maybe 10%, 15% cap, and then they flood everybody else. That is a spawn bomb. I think the team that probably is most famous for that is GBI. Helios is okay at it. We're not the greatest, but we're okay at it. And that's where we have like a sort of code word balderdash to say, hey, once we say this word, everybody goes on the attack no matter what you're doing. Well, most of the time, no matter what you're doing, but few exceptions. But go on the attack. Everybody go, because we have to take advantage of this opportunity. Everybody needs to go now. Okay? But anyways, number 2, determine your risk appetite. Some teams want to play a little more conservative because they're not as confident in their ability to respond to a threat in the back line. Or some teams are super aggressive and they want everybody on the attack and will respond to defensive pressure as we see fit. Obviously, both sides have positives and negatives because if the enemy starts capping, like I said, you can be caught off guard. And then on the other side, though, you could have more bodies on the offense and it could lead to a quicker win during the game. Okay? But that is number 2, determine your risk appetite. How risky do we want to be with this? It's okay to be conservative. Helios is a little bit conservative. We play with maybe 4 to 6 guys on defense at all times, and then we'll flex bodies to the front line as the map situation develops. Okay? Number 3, you have to understand what map you're playing. Now, this will determine your garrison and radar network, which will help relink to number 1 and 2. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at SMDM right now. So this is Strat Sketch. For those of you that watch the other videos, you'll recognize this. And go ahead and take a look at those as far as me covering Strat Sketch. I think it's in part 3 where I talk about that for the 5 tips for Helios. new competitive teams. But here we have Strat Sketch, and this was a match for Helios versus, I think this was XD on SMDM. And once again, so number 3 we're talking about is determine your garrison and radar network for the map you're playing in. Let's talk about SMDM. So a lot of people know this map. We're going to go ahead and go through AA Network, which most people know as well. Let's talk about this. Here we have AA Network, and over here we have the key points. We have 5 points over here, so we call 5 points because of the 5 roads leading into it. And then on the right-hand side, we have Pierre's Farm, and in the back line, or on the left-hand side, we have Dugout. Okay. Now for AA Network, what are the key parts to play on defense? Because let's talk about defense here. Not talk about offense. Let's talk about defense. We'll go Ted and okay. We'll take a look at the OPs here. But this is the opening. And what is the Achilles heel for AA Network? We always want to understand what your Achilles heel is for each one of these points. Now I've streamed a couple hundred games, maybe more. I don't know. I don't try to really keep track. But in all the times I usually see where teams cap AA Network, it's going to be back here. Because the defense maybe didn't put their OP up back there, maybe the Gary's a little bit farther back, and the radar coverage in which you build needs to be able to ping where the enemy is approaching. So when the Gary lights up, your team should be able to respond to this. But here on AA Network, we have a Gary up here on the border, Gary over here, and then a couple Garys back here. Okay, and once again, going back to understanding the terrain, you have to understand that all this is open field right here, so we're not going to put a garrison up there. But why are we putting the garrisons right here? Because we have to understand if we cap AA Network, the enemy can only put up Garys in 5 and 6 grid lines here. If that's where they only can put up garrisons, then let's monitor the border. Because if we put a garrison back here, then the enemy, if they try to put one right here, then the Gary should ping, and we should be able to respond to that. Same thing goes on the left-hand side. If the enemy tries to put a garrison up here on the road, it should ping, and we should respond to that. But the main point here is to create a nice interlocking network, going like this here. But you want to create a nice interlocking network of garrisons and outposts, so all that will piece together, and you'll be able to spot the enemy if they try to sneak into the back line. Because once again, we're just talking about defense. Defense should be focused on the back line and making sure the front line can do whatever they need to do to adjust to the situation. Defense monitors the back line, front line pushes up. And they want to have that peace of mind to knowing they can fully commit everyone on the attack. Here behind SMDN or AA Network, we have the defense OP that will be moving back here. Or we have the garrison right here, and then we'll probably shift the OP back here to cover this gap right there. And then on the left-hand side, once again, using the black pins for the defensive OPs. We'll keep an OP back here by Pierre's Farm to support, and then we'll maybe move one back here just to monitor the hedge lines and making sure nobody's sneaking around. And of course, the OPs also act as backup for the frontline squads, because remember, if the frontline squads lose their outposts, then the infantry can swap to the defensive OP, and you can move on forward. One of the common questions I get is, what is the optimal squad for a competitive game? Well, no squad really stays the same throughout. People are constantly shifting between this OP and that OP, so nothing is really ever stays the same. Now, what you will find is general parts of the map for groups stay the same, so you have different divisions that control each part. Those will stay the same, but for the most part, OPs go up and down and move around. And then for the other side of a network, we'll probably move maybe one more OP. So most likely we'll have a division shift over here, over to the right-hand side, maybe move 1 or 2 OPs over there. And then we'll shift a defensive OP from bottom up Pierre's Farm to somewhere over here to help support. So maybe on this road right there. So that way we have all the backline covered and we can respond as necessary. And we can use the border garrisons to reflank the enemy should they make any penetration over here on each one of the sides. Okay? Once again, going back to the philosophy of you want the defense to monitor the backline and create a nice network of garrisons and OPs, so that way when it pings, you can respond to that as necessary. And then over here, once again, using these garrisons on the flanks to respawn and reflank the enemy should they, set up on the sides over here. But as long as the front line remains stable across the map, and they make ground over here, and maybe we see post-cap situation and OP shift over here, and then another one up here, or over there, because the OPs always start spreading out after the cap is solidified. So maybe we'll see an OP up here, and the team will be spread throughout the map. Now, of course, in the defense, we'll be responsible for just monitoring the backline, make sure nobody sneaks through, and if they do, they're able to spot them. Okay, so that is tip number, what am I looking at here? Tip number 3. Understand what map you're playing. Where is your Achilles heel? Where's our Achilles heel on a network? It's usually right back here, right behind the point, as far as where the least expected enemy approaches and where they usually set up Garys and a rush towards the point. Okay. Now, granted, for those of you on the attack, don't blame your defense if somehow somebody sneaks through and gets up a garrison in the back line. If your defense is working hard, monitoring the area, there are some people that are so sneaky in this game that they go around and they will literally hide in the hedgerows for 20 minutes waiting for their time to shine. Don't blame your defense if somebody like that sneaks through, puts up a garrison, you see a little spawn bomb. The important thing is understanding how your team is able to react and just wipe it out as quickly as possible. Now remember, if you're playing defense and you spot an enemy garrison and you're in the back line and you're the only one near it, just remember to go within 100 meters of that garrison and it will be locked. So you can ping on the map and be like, okay, hey, I'm going to lock that garrison. I'm going to lay low. The enemy can't spawn on it because I need backup. I'm not going to go take out that garrison all by my lonesome, because what if I get shot? Then the enemy can spawn in that garrison. So stay within 100 meters, wait for backup, and then approach the garrison. That is my best piece of advice for any defensive squad lead out there. Because if you get taken out and they spawn bomb that thing, who knows what might happen. Spot it, get within 100 meters, lock it, lay low, and call for backup. That's my piece of advice to you. That's what we do in Helios, is for the most time, more than one person swarming an enemy garrison. And if not, we're having spawns come in as soon as possible. Okay, let's go on here. And once again, just understand your Achilles heel, understand a good radar, garrison network, all that sort of stuff, and you should be good. Okay, moving on to tip number 4 is a question of who do I roster on defense? If I am planning the roster for my team, who do I put on defense? I'll tell you who you don't put on defense. You don't want to put your worst shooters. You don't want to do that, because most of the time the attacking team is sending some of their best guys around to flank you because they know that they can have the most bang for the buck. If they get around and win a couple gunfights, they could start a little bit cap pressure, maybe get their OPs up, get a little 6-man OP going, maybe 2 OPs, 12-man, and next thing you know, you have a big problem in your backline. The enemy team will most likely send their best shooters around. As some teams call them flex squads, some teams call them whammos, some teams call them just rear attack. There's so many different names that people use. I've seen one team call it Flank Dynasty. That was a really cool name. That was cool. But you want to roster people on defense that at least have as close to 1-to-1 KD ratios in their stats or greater. Not your best shooters, obviously, but you want people back in a line that can win gunfights and at least trade with the enemy. And what kind of person does this take? You looking for qualities such as the ability to remain calm, be able to stay in one spot for a long time. You have some defensive guys that just will have maybe 3 or 4 kills the whole game, but what did they prevent? They prevented maybe multiple garrisons from going up in the back line, outposts, that sort of thing. And maybe they got 2 or 3 airheads also. You never know, but defensive people need to be very patient, very calm, and they need to be very good at communication, because like I mentioned before with the garrison, if they see an enemy garrison and they need to go they need backup to take it out, they got to be able to scream that in command chat saying, hey, I need backup. If they don't have any people in their defensive tent, they can do it at the time. You got to be able to say, hey, I need help, or hey, I think there's an airhead here, I think they have a garrison here, I think I saw a half track or something, and you'd be able to scream out those markers in command chat and get the attention of the team to say, hey, okay, we got to go help defense real quick before it becomes a bigger problem. It's much easier to respond to a small attack at first with a large force than it is to wait and maybe test the waters and see how many bodies are back there, because really good teams will capitalize real fast on you not paying attention to the back line. Trust me, I've been on both ends of the stick. Just be careful. But once again, you want to monitor people that are patient, that have no problem playing in the same spot the whole game. They are just very attentive, looking out for planes, airheads, supply drops, whatever it may be, looking out the distance for vehicles, maybe a Puma rolling around, maybe a half track, anything. Let's take a look at an example here on Foy. This was a game between EGIG and VLK on Foy Night. And here we have Magnum Grant. So Magnum Grant is up here on the top of a dugout barn, and he is monitoring everything in the distance. He's up here just taking his time, listening and guarding this flank, because he has responsibility to hold this ground. That's a key thing with defensive people. You want to make sure that they understand the responsibility, and they're not just going to not wander off anywhere and say, oh, this is boring, I'm not going to stay here the whole game, this is dumb, and they go join the front line and drop their OP somewhere else. That's not who you want on defense. And if they don't fit anywhere else, then don't try your best not to roster them, or at least explain to them, hey, this is why you're not getting rostered. We need you to do this job, and it's a very important job, because you're watching this distance, making sure the enemy's not flanking around. And Magnum Grant here is a perfect example of this. Watch. It's such a nice view from up here. He's using his binos, looking out into the distance, understanding, hey, this is where the enemy is, this is where the enemy isn't, and he's able to look out to the distance and totally monitor all. And look at this. One guy can watch all that sector. And now Mike's OP is pinging in the background, and so what's going to happen? He's going to call it out in command chat, or somebody else will. All squad leads, remember, this is a team game. It's important for all squad leads when they look at the map to say, hey, does anybody see that Mike's OP is pinging right now? We need to respond to this. And usually teams respond with maybe 2 or 3 bodies on that OP just to look around the area. Recon will always sometimes go back to a pinging garrison or OP, or pinging garrison, and pop a flare around and see what else is out there. All this flanking action going on. But this one guy, Magnum Grant, can look out all this sector right here, guys, and just be able to monitor all this and report back to his team. And it gives the rest of the team a very good insurance policy, to say, okay, hey, we're good. We can continue on the attack towards Cobru, and Magnum Grant's over there. He's doing his job. He's letting us know if he sees anything. And like, for example, tanks flanking around is always huge on Foy, but this guy's doing his job. And I always like to highlight defensive SLs on my streams, because they're the unsung heroes of the matches usually. They're out there, quiet as hell, maybe fire 10 rounds the whole game, but they do a very key job out in the flanks. Oh, look, somebody snuck past him over there. And so Magnum Grant's turning around, and he'll look towards that way and see what's out there. But he's in a very key spot, monitoring the area, and he's getting nice wham bam shabamo for me. So that is a perfect example of a defensive SL sticking to one spot and looking out an open area. Okay, let's move on to this game here on A Network, and we'll talk about this. Here we have the Achilles heel back here. We had to move our garrisons back, and now sometimes, just a real quick note on Garrison and Radar Network, sometimes you have to face reality in that you won't be able to get a perfect garrison network up on your points. Because maybe the enemy is pressuring you like hell, and you need to shift some backline Garys in the 7 grid, for example, a little bit backwards, so you can fit some Garys closer to your point. I think most teams will look at this situation and go, oh, why don't you put the garrison up on top of the 6 grid? Why don't you try to maximize the 200 meter space? Well, sometimes the front line is so contested that it doesn't make sense to do that, because the enemy will go around the corner and pop your garrison. In this case, we moved the AA Network garrison back, and we shifted Love Squad's OP up, and it should be able to spot anything getting back there. And then Love Squad is obviously patrolling the flank right here, and then I'm right here on the left-hand side looking over the area. And then we have blueberries all around monitoring as well. Now, keep in mind that we do have a recon defense and we have a recon offense. Recon defense is right behind the point, and if we need a flare in the back line, he pops back there, shoots it right away, and we can see what's back there. You need to be able to take advantage of the recon flares as much as possible because it's a free freaking recon in a little area. And if the enemy's hiding, like I said, GBI is really good at this, but hiding in this little sector right here, they can put up a garrison real fast, and next thing you know, they're spawn bombing your point. Use recon on a defense and then have a recon in the offense. At least that's how we play most of the time. Just depends, once again, what your risk appetite is. Some teams have 2 recon defenses because they want to cover everything. They don't want to let anything slip by. I think that covers who do you roster on defense. I mean, we mentioned they're playing a long game. They have to be prepared to be bored, but they have a job to do. And they have to understand that this is a very important job because it allows the rest of the team to push up. And then, I think that covers number 4. Tip number 5, for smaller teams. Now I'm talking 30 teams, 30 versus 30 teams, 35 versus 35. What you can do essentially is
I got killed to the southwest.
When you're playing maps like SMDM and you're short on outposts because you only have 30 versus 30, so let's assume 2 tank squads, so that's 6 guys right there, and you're down to 24 people for infantry. What you can do is you can start a squad and then have infantry join that squad. The squad lead puts down their OP in the back line, let's say right back here behind A network, and then so you have 2 people in the squad lead and infantry, and so the squad lead can swap out of being squad lead and jump back in being infantry, and then the infantry guy can leave and go to another squad. And that way, you have a constant cycle of squad leads and OPs going up around the map, and you can really maximize the number of outposts that you have, versus only playing with maybe 7 or 8 outposts in a 30 versus 30. Now remember, though, that if you lose that outpost, whoever's in the squad will have to swap back to squad lead and put that back up. A little bit of risk there, but at least it gives you more radar around the map, and that's how you can adapt to the smaller teams and the sort of limitations that you're placed on. All right. Another thing you can do as well when it comes to smaller teams, of course this applies to bigger teams, is you want to be able to have or use light tanks and recon tanks on defense. A lot of times I see so many times on stream where you have just light tanks and recon tanks sitting in the spawns and not being used. You can use those tanks, and you can use them with one body. Just put one guy in there and have him drive around in the back line and just look for OPs and garrisons, or maybe perch up on a certain spot and just monitor the distance. And if that tanker gets taken out, then you know that there's enemies in the back line. So try to use light and recon tanks. They're free, and you can just roam around quickly and very speedy, that sort of thing, and this really helps the defense out. Plus, if your defense is struggling on the fragging side and they're losing gunfights, then somebody jumping into a tank will help neutralize that a little bit, because they're only going to be able to be taken out by AT. And if they can sort of offset the lack of fragging capability your team has, then you should be able to take care of it a little bit easier. There's an example recently with Legion 201. Let's go and take a look at that. Here, Legion is beginning to lose the point. We see on the map how R22R has multiple OPs around. They have a front door garrison ready to go. Okay, here, Legion was losing the point, cattle sheds, and they brought up a medium right here in the middle of the screen to help support the infantry, because the infantry were losing some key frags. R22R was able to get inside cattle sheds, but the medium helped neutralize this push that they had on point. Have any armor support, so they have to take care of these tanks all by themselves. Allies doing a really good job of using their tanks defensively, the free tanks especially. Using those free tanks, because remember, heavies are very, very pricey in the game, and they're very valuable. Meanwhile, you can use these free spawn tanks and just load them up on defense. They brought up a medium right here to splash the point, and they also brought up a Stewie on the right-hand side later on to help wipe out some of the infantry. And this way they can have a little bit more support, and the tank, especially the recon tank, you don't have to worry about gear shifting, can roam around along the hedges and wipe OPs and just go in and out everywhere and really help your defense. Okay, so that is the tips I have for this part 1, everybody. Let me know if you have any questions, but I'll be doing part 2 here shortly over the next couple days or so for defense and talk about that a little bit more. Then, of course, talk about offense, commanders, So plenty more to come. And once again, let me know if you have any questions. Be sure to drop that like button, hit subscribe, all that kind of good stuff, right? And yeah, okay. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one, buddy.